Thanks for stopping by the channel. Make sure you are subscribed and that you're checking out the bell icon down there. If you get the right bell icon settings, you'll get notifications for all my content. And as always, like, share, and comment. Those things are very important to me. Why? One, well, like or dislike. I like to know where people's minds are on what I'm saying. Comments about what you'd like to hear me talk about, what you want me to not talk about, or where you disagree with me are foundationally important. I believe in civil discourse. So even if you disagree with me, I like to hear from you. Just try to keep the profanities to a minimum, if you will, and don't use ad hominem fallacies or just personal insults. It's just, that stuff's just stupid. Name calling can be okay from time to time. And shares, if you like what I'm saying and you want it to get out, I love that. If you don't like what I'm saying and you want people to come and track me down and fight back on the channel, I like that even more. It makes me grow. So, and that kind of leads into what I'm going to talk about in this video for today. Somebody asked me a while ago, why is it that you are willing to fight? Why don't you just back down when you run into resistance? And drinking my morning coffee. And it's a longer story than I probably really want to go into, but I'm going to give a little bit of background. See, this is probably going to come as no surprise to anybody who knows me and anybody who's been watching the content I put out for a while. I've never been popular. It's just not who I am. I've always been outspoken. In fact, I had kind of a reacquainting with a person I went to high school with several years ago, probably 7 or 8 years ago now. This person reached out to me and through Facebook, and we communicated quite intensely for probably about a month to 2 months. And one of the things that she said to me is what I always admired about you and will always remember about you from school, especially high school, is you were outspoken. Like, you didn't just agree with teachers to agree. You shared your thoughts and you defended yourself. And while she said that she always respected that, I don't know how much that is true in the sense of how much it was what she respected then. We always got along. She was one of the few, but I don't know that she really respected it then. I think she was just, genuinely a kind person, a decent person. But it might be something that as she thought about me in hindsight, she respected. But what I'll tell you is it did not endear me to the people that I was surrounded by in school, junior high, elementary even, or especially in high school. And I had learned at a pretty young age to fight back. And part of it came after getting into moving to a little bit larger city than where I started school. And in running into what it meant to be on the outside, on the periphery of the accepted culture in the school. And so, like, if you're at all familiar with the band Rush, they talk about that in their song Subdivisions, be cool or be cast out. And that was me. It was be cool or be cast out. And I wasn't really all that interested in being cool. And I wanted to be me. I wanted to be me. And I didn't want to have to conform to whatever the cultural and societal norms were. Not that I'm against traditional cultural norms. That's not it at all. I think as a matter of fact, I went through a very brief period in high school where I was very much anti-war, and I'm not pro-war now, but I mean, like I was like a anti like war, like would make art pieces and write poetry and other thing in prose about being anti-war, and it was a very short period of time because it was just kind of where I was at, and it was a little bit of a rebellious phase, I guess you could say. But I just never put a lot of effort into fitting in, and that led to a lot of situations where I had to learn how to fight, like on both a physical level and on a intellectual and rhetorical level. I had to learn how to fight. Now, physically, I hated I hate physical conflict. I hate physical confrontation. Absolutely despise it. Always have, always will. And now that I'm, a Christian and have been since 2004, genuinely converted, um, the idea of being the initiator of force, of using force to get my way, is anathema to me. I don't want that to be ever the case of where we need to go. Now I realize there are times where it's necessary. Like you hurt somebody in my family. If you're physically hurting someone in my family or someone I care about, we're going to come to blows. Uh, but it's not what I want. And starting as early as my elementary days, I never initiated force, but I also, when it was brought to bear on me, I never lost. Now, and that went through until I graduated from high school. I've lost a couple of physical altercations in my life as a adult, depending on how you term adult. Uh, but I never lost a physical altercation from elementary school on. I didn't take well to being physically pushed around. My dad, and a lot of people's dads said this. My dad said, "Don't you ever start a fight, but you be the one that finishes it." And what he meant when he said that in the physical realm is, if you go around starting the fights, you are going to be the problem. But if people start fights with you and you aren't the one that finishes the fight, you're never going to be at the end of fighting. And so once every several months, every 6 months or so, I'd end up in a physical altercation because people would start them with me. And oftentimes they would start them in a way where it wasn't just them. In fact, the more I won, the more they would gang up on me, and the more they would gang up on me, the more they would lose, which would anger them even more. And that was just where it was. I refused to cave into physical assault. And that made me a stronger person. But where most of my fighting came was in rhetoric, in um, verbal and um, not just physical bullying, but in verbal bullying and in social bullying. And I never backed down there either. So I go to sixth grade. I had a teacher. I think I had this particular time. It was a social studies class. Her name was Mrs. Thompson, and she was a mean person. Everybody has this picture of teachers today that they're kind and gentle and they're sweet and they're long suffering and very compassionate and they care about their students so much, and that's probably the case with most teachers in the government school system or any other school system. But back then there were still these old school teachers who quite even then were quite on the left, and Mrs. Thompson was one of them. And she was very much a good old boys club kind of person. Like if you were somebody in this town, then your parents were somebody, then you were okay. But she liked to, and this should tell you how foundationally and fundamentally important this interaction was, as I remember this from sixth grade. And it was one of the times that my parents really came to bat for me. Um, she was in this class. She was chastising people who were hunting, and I kind of was defending hunters because I grew up hunting with my dad. We had taken on archery hunting for deer and other critters in the wooded lands of southeast or southwest Minnesota, and or not Minnesota, Iowa. Gee, whew, boy, am I losing it. But she took after me and other hunters because what we were doing was evil, and it was horrible to do that to animals. It was not right that we should do that. And I was like, well, hey, look, what we kill, we eat. Squirrels, rabbits, pheasants, quail, whatever it is that we're going after. If we get a deer, we're going to eat it. We're going to butcher it. We're going to do everything we can to get that meat. Do we hunt for fun? Partially, but we also hunt it because we like the meat. But she took after me, but then she started to talk about how much she liked to go fishing, and we also like to fish. And when we fish, we eat what we catch, or we would release it. Not within reason. And I asked her, I said, well, you go fishing here in kind of the same areas that we do. Like, so when you catch some of these garbage fish, whether it's, drum or a gar or carp or whatever, what do you do with them? She goes, well, they're garbage fish. I throw them up on the shore. I'm like, well, isn't that just a waste, a needless waste of animal life? Oh boy, was she upset. She was upset, but why was she upset? She was upset because I dared to challenge her authority. I had no right in her eyes to point out her hypocrisy. I had no right in her eyes to point out where she was wrong. And frankly, that's always who I have been. And I learned that in my formative years, elementary school, on through junior high, and into my senior high years. Did it cause me problems? Sure, it did. But see, what I learned early on was that people in positions of authority, teachers, superintendents, principals, people who are in elected offices, elected servants positions, appointed servants positions, they like to consider themselves to be the powerful. They like to consider themselves to be the sole source of power. And once they're in those positions, they don't like to be challenged. You are subservient to them in their eyes. The vast majority of them. And I don't care if you're a neutral type of office. Think of the people who run for attorney general. They're supposed to be neutral. Judges are supposed to be neutral. Sheriffs are supposed to be neutral. They don't run as Republicans or Democrats, conservatives or leftists. They're just law enforcement. Judges are the same way. Now, as you get into other offices, obviously there's political agendas involved. So it just doesn't really matter. These people consider themselves to be the source of power. And as they attain those offices, appointed or elected, those servants' positions, they hate to be challenged because don't you understand that I am the master? Don't you understand that I am the voice of authority in this area? And what I say goes. And that's a form of bullying. But what we don't call it bullying in the grown-up world, we call it authoritarianism. And so the vast majority of these people that we're dealing with today, whether they be on the left or on the right, are some form of authoritarianism. Now, the leftists will call the people on the right they're authoritarians. They call them fascists. And the people on the right that are people who are on the left in authoritarian positions, we don't know what to call them because we don't like to engage in labeling because we want to be liked. By we, I'm painting with a broad brush here, not me. I have no problem with this. I will call them what they are, Marxist authoritarians, or a form of Marxist fascism, really, is what it is. A lot of the people on the left, as much as they hate fascism, are executing and implementing fascist practices. The problem is they hate being stood up to. They hate being told, I don't have to do what you say. They hate being resisted. And that is why I fight. And that's where I learned to fight. There again, I'm not talking about the physical altercation. I'm talking about the rhetorical, philosophical, debate type fighting. You know, like I won't be bullied. I won't be authoritarian into submission. I don't care who you are. I don't care what position you hold. If I'm doing something illegal, use the authority that you have to fight me at a legal level. But if you don't like the things that I say, if you don't like my opinions, whether you think they're radical or you think they're dangerous, you don't get to silence me, and you don't get to silence anybody else. So let's talk about the use of the phrase hate speech today. Like, a lot of people will tell you that the First Amendment applies to everything except for hate speech. That's not true. First Amendment covers hate speech as well. Now, do I like hate speech? No, I don't like hate speech from anybody. If you're a white nationalist who hates black people and you want to talk bad about them, I despise that kind of rhetoric. If you're a black nationalist or a black racist, and there are thousands of them in the United States today, just like there are thousands of white racists in this United States today, I don't like what you're saying. I despise your racist rhetoric. I despise racist rhetoric, period. But you have a right to say it. You also have the responsibility and the liberty to suffer the consequences for it. But should it be a crime? Should you be silenced for it? No. That's bullying. It's authoritarian practices. And I'll fight that. See, I'm going to fight the bully, no matter who that bully is, no matter what position they hold, no matter what, whether they're an elected servant or appointed servant. I'm going to fight the bully. I'm going to fight the bully. That's part of who I am. That's part of what has made this country great. We have repeatedly and historically always fought the bullies. We're going to continue to fight the bullies. We have to fight the bullies. Now, and here's the other part of this. Like, if you've never learned this kind of behavior, like if you haven't learned how to fight, I'm sorry. Like, if you're over the age of 15, 16, or 17 in that age bracket, and you've never learned how to fight back, to defend yourself, like on a physical level, but chiefly on a rhetorical level, in the world of ideas, if you haven't learned how to fight back and defend yourself, and not only to fight back and defend yourself, but to carry your ideas forward and to be on the offensive ideologically and philosophically and rhetorically, it's not too late for you, but it's going to be harder for you. But you've got to learn it. Like, open your eyes. Like, the bullies in positions of authority are coming for you. The authoritarians are coming for you. The Marxist fascists and the rightist fascists are coming for you. Like, you may not be the person who's saying and doing things out in the public eye right now, but sooner or later, if you do not learn how to fight back against the bullies and figure out who is on your side and who's going to align themselves with you in fighting against bullies, it will be too late for you, because they will take you out one by one. They're coming for my friends all over the country. They're coming for people like me all over the place. There's literally an active movement to deperson people who have the wrong thoughts. Now, and here's the thing, like, you will never find any ethnic or racial hatred on my channel, ever. But my thought process is still wrong. to people in positions of authority, because it's not about acquiescing and kowtowing to the societal norms today. I don't believe in bowing down to the all-knowing and all-powerful state. And by state, I mean any government body. I don't believe in bowing down to them. I don't believe they have the authority or the power constitutionally to do that to us. See, the Constitution doesn't give us rights. The Constitution doesn't say what it's okay for us to do. The Constitution limits the power of government. And that's what people have to understand. It's not about what we are approved to do. It's about what the government cannot do to you as an individual, no matter what your position might be, no matter what your ideological or rhetorical position is. And I learned that early on, that the powers that be hate to be resisted. They hate it. And it doesn't matter. I don't care if you're a dyed-in-the-wool Republican. Most of your so-called conservative, dyed-in-the-wool Republican types are just as bad as the people on the left. Most, not all. I'm painting with a really broad brush. But most are. There are elected representatives here in the state of Minnesota that are Republicans, but they're rhinos. And they'll say what they need to say in office, but they will not listen to their constituents because, gosh darn it, this is my office, this is my seat, and I'm going to stay in it. And you will listen to me. They're just as bad as the left in many ways. And they collude with the left to silence the peons that aren't in their positions of power. I see it all the time. And that's why I fight. And I learned to fight this fight a very long time ago because I've never been that popular person. People don't like me. I don't care. I've never been in life to be liked. And I really don't care if you respect me. Like, I don't hold the views that I hold, the opinions that I have, and I don't espouse what I know to be right because I want you to like me. Because if I wanted you to like me, I'd be woke. Because right now, being woke is how you get liked. And I'm not woke, I'm awake. I won't be bullied by anybody from any position on either side of the argument, left or right. I won't be bullied. I won't be shut down. I'll always find a place to voice what I have to say. And I will always fight the bullies. I will always fight the authoritarians. Always fight them. Because they need to be fought. They need to be reminded of who they are. They need to be reminded of who they serve. They need to be reminded that they're the subservient ones. And that they serve we the people according to the Constitution. And it's their power that is limited. And that's why I fight. And it's where I learned to fight a very long time ago. God, and there again, some of you aren't going to like that, but God took me through that for such a time as this. And so for those people who think, well, we can get him shut down off of YouTube, or we can get him, kicked off of Twitter, or we can get him kicked off of this, or we can get him kicked off of that, or we can do this to him, or we can do that to them. Like, you might win those little fights, but you're never going to silence me. You're never going to shut me down. If I have to, I'll go out into a street corner. If I have to, I'll do it right in front of you. Sooner or later, people will notice. I've always been like that. And I'm not worried about whether or not you like me or respect me. And the more that people come at us for this kind of view, for these views, the more that people come to try and shut down people out there who are outspoken, the more it demonstrates just how afraid of us they are. The bullies, the authoritarians are afraid of us because they don't know how to deal with us. They have tactics, but none of their tactics work on us. They're afraid. And I want them to be afraid. I want them to be afraid of the truth. I want them to be afraid of the light. And that's what you should want as well. Thank you for listening. And until next time, don't worry about being safe. Live free. Sic semper tyrannis.